Hi there. Welcome to Mushroom Hour. Today on Mushroom Hour, we have the honor of interviewing Mr. James McConchie, the proprietor of San Francisco's Haight Street Shroom Shoppe. He is a self-taught mycology lover and forager who was first inspired to explore the world of mushrooms in the aftermath of a traumatic cancer diagnosis in his family. Inspired by the transformative experiences he had with mushrooms, James founded the Haight Street Shroom Shoppe to educate others about the power of mushrooms, how they grow, their healing properties, and their history and future. James, great to have you on the show.
Thank you so much, Darren. I really appreciate it. And I just want to say how much I love the Mushroom Hour. I've been a follower for over a year now, and you guys are doing great things.
Right on. Well, that's kind of how we met, was through Instagram. That's always great when Instagram connections become real life connections, especially with people who are right in my neck of the woods in the Bay Area doing cool things. And I guess where I want to start, because there's a lot to talk about. You have the Haight Street Shroom Shoppe, your own voyages into DIY mycology, your own experiences with mushrooms. But where I like to start with most people is an origin story, kind of how you came to mushrooms, if it was something developed in your childhood. In your case, after reading some of your About Me on your website, I see there was an experience with your partner who had cancer that kind of brought you into it. So yeah, talk a little bit about how you got into mushrooms.
Sure. It was exactly that situation. I mean, my experience as a younger person with mushrooms is the same as I think a lot of other people's out there, is that we're kind of told to stay away from mushrooms, in particular out in the wild. Yep. They could kill you. That's generally what we're taught as younger people, because the level of knowledge that is required to most people seems over the top. Like you'd have to really learn this crazy science level stuff to be able to go out and identify mushrooms. So that was kind of my youth experience. And then, I had some fun, psychedelic experiences in my teens and my 20s. And then as I kind of progressed in life and moved out to the Bay Area, mushrooms just became a gourmet thing for me. And it wasn't until my wife was diagnosed with stage 2 breast cancer that mushrooms came into my life in a more prominent way. And it was mainly from a friend that had turned me on to Paul Stamets's TED Talk that he did. I think it was all the way back in 2005 is when he initially did that.
The infamous early 2000s Paul Stamets TED Talk, that influenced a lot of people, I think.
Yeah, it's a really great talk. I do highly recommend it. He talks about how mushrooms in many of their different forms can help save the world. And then the powerful impact in the end is he brings his mother out on stage, who was diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer, which is pretty much a terminal diagnosis, and she was able to completely put her cancer into remission through the use of the turkey tail mushroom. So after hearing this story and reading this story, learning more about my wife's diagnosis, and surprisingly enough, her diagnosis was the exact same diagnosis as what Paul Stamets's mom had, and the exact same therapy, because it wasn't just turkey tail mushrooms. Like, we have to be really clear with that. There were some other Western drugs and chemotherapy and radiation therapy, in addition to the turkey tail mushrooms and the supplements, and having a good diet, and making sure that there was some sort of physical activity in the regular, in order for her to actually get through the treatment in a positive light. And the positive light is that she went through almost completely symptom-free, and came out the other side of the treatment relatively unscathed from the negative side effects that occur from these drugs, neuropathy, vision, sight, vision, blurred vision, things like that. And then, within a year, we found out she was in full remission. And so whether it's said to be the mushrooms or not the mushrooms, I can tell you from my own experience supplementing mushrooms for the past few years since I started this journey, that they do have a really positive effect on your overall health. And I think there's a very high likelihood in the next few years, fungi in general are going to be a much more prominent thing in everybody's lives.
And it sounds like it's about integrating them in to otherwise well understood kind of healthy regimens. Like, mushrooms aren't the panacea. If you have certain symptoms, it's not take this mushroom, it'll cure it. It's like integrate this mushroom with all these other good habits you should be building, all these other good things you should be doing, and it'll be kind of a booster to make all those efforts really see positive effects. Because I know there are a lot of people who say, take lion's mane, it'll regrow your brain, or take turkey tail to cure cancer. It sounds like it's a little more, it's not as cut and dry as that.
Yeah, I would agree with that statement 100%. And when I talk on this in my class, in my workshops, I try to simplify things, because I get an opportunity to talk about mushrooms and talk about health for about 2 hours with people, and to make it as simple as possible, I kind of break it into these 3 different areas of the mind, the body, and the spirit, and how we keep those 3 different areas balanced in our lives is it's an individual recipe, and that's the hard part is finding out that individual recipe, because
right.
We are all individuals, and if we all prescribe to the fact that if you do one thing it's going to cause this end result, that's not very realistic, because of that individuality, to think that if we all take this one mushroom we're all going to get better the same way. So building that recipe of all these different things, and through my wife's experience and my own personal experience, healing myself from my accident that happened last July, I can truly say that, building that recipe and being mindful is really the key to all of this holistic health that we're all turning around towards.
Yeah. So your entry then into mushrooms is kind of through that experiential study of holistic health, using it both in your wife's case and it sounds like in your case as well, to get positive health outcomes. So then how did your experience with those potent medicinal aspects of mushrooms, that supplementation of your diet and your wellness regimen, how did that move into a love of DIY mycology? Because I know at the Haight Street Shroom Shoppe, you're teaching people how to grow mushrooms, how to culture mushrooms. So when did that transition happen? Was that existing before you got into medicinal mushrooms? How did that come about?
I've always loved to kind of put my hands in dirt. I'm originally from the East Coast. I grew up in New Hampshire, not in the woods, so to say, but we played a lot in the woods, and being out there and going and hunting for spearmint and going and hunting for little edible roots and stuff like that.
Oh, so you did some foraging
in
your youth.
Definitely when I was a kid.
Nice.
There's a lot of fun things that when you go to science class out in the East Coast, you can learn as a kid. I didn't know anything about mushrooms at the time, but for me, the transition was, surprisingly enough, was paying, about $40-something and doubling that. So about $80 for a supplementation bottle of turkey tail mushrooms every couple of weeks for my wife.
Right.
And then when I realized I could walk like 3 blocks from where I live into Golden Gate Park and literally pick these mushrooms, I kind of started thinking in my mind, well, wait a minute. If these just naturally grow right where I am, and I'm from a medicinal standpoint, of course, I was willing to pay whatever was required to help my wife in her treatment. But
sure.
After the fact, I kind of looking at everything, and as I said, well, maybe we can just grow these. And so that's how I kind of started diving into getting just, home grow kits and starting there and being patient using those. And then digging even further to figure out different methods for home growing. And then I started learning about all the different types of substrates and all the different types of methods. And I got kind of geeked out, and I just ended up buying my first pressure cooker. And anybody that does home mycology knows that once you get the pressure cooker, you're pretty much ready to go.
Yeah, it's on. I mean, it sounds like you got inoculated. That happens with people. I see a lot of people start growing mushrooms, start doing their own DIY mycology work, and you just dive in. I mean, either you treat it as kind of a side hobby and then kind of veer away from it, or you dive all the way in. Like there's no in between. And definitely once you have the pressure cooker, you are on the path to full scale DIY mycology.
That's right.
Because then you can start inoculating your own substrates. I guess, did you start out with a flow hood, or did you mostly buy existing cultures on Petri elsewhere? Or?
Well, so the first inoculant that I got was a spore syringe from somebody that convinced me that I could do it. And that was the turning point for me. And then I started looking up basic home mycology techniques. And when we have a moment, I'll pull it out. But I started with a still air box that I made out of cardboard box.
Wow, out of cardboard.
Yep. And I lined it with tin foil, and then I went to this really awesome recycled place here in San Francisco called Scrap, and I bought a small piece of plexiglass, and I put that on top, and I made myself a small still air box, and I show it every single workshop because I want people to know that when you go online and you see how people make all these monotubs and they make all these different things that they use to grow mushrooms or get these giant flushes and all these cool things that most of us that follow Instagram feeds love to visually look at. The reality is you don't need as much as you see or that what people visually show to get to that point where I like to say where you go from pick to pan, where the very first time you ever pick like a lion's mane right off the block, chop it up right there and then throw it into your food. It'll be a life-changing experience outside of just eating it in a pill or eating it in, even if you go find it outside in the wild, then, and I know you know this from your own experience, it's just like, it's so connecting and it feels so good.
That's the game-changing moment when you really take it yourself, either something you've grown, something you found, you cook it, you prepare it, you somehow ingest it and feel the effects. That's where the light goes off and says, this is something I should invest my time in. This is something I should do more of. Now, for me, I had a history with DIY mycology. I started seeing people on Instagram feeds, on YouTube, like you do. I see people making petri dishes with mushroom cultures on them. I see people inoculating, rye grain jars. And for me, I actually didn't have, or I didn't create my own still air box. I kind of immediately sought out community and found people that kind of had the more advanced setup to learn from. Now, did you kind of start from the ground level based on things you made yourself, or did you find a group of people to connect with that taught you, or how did that work?
Yeah, it's really funny for me in my overall growing journey because I had a whole different set of intentions and a different set of reasons for why I was interested in mainly seeing if I could do it. It was a personal challenge to myself to kind of see if I could teach myself something new. And so initially I didn't seek out a lot of help other than online help. And that online help gave me enough guidance to feel confident to keep moving forward. And then as I got that first flush, that first time I grew my own shiitakes, that first time I grew my own lion's mane, the first time I grew my own pink oysters, and I highly recommend everybody grow pink oysters because the first time you see them, you'll be so happy because they're beautiful.
You fall in love, yeah.
Yeah, you fall in love.
They are beautiful. Oysters in general, I think, are a great one to start with.
Agreed.
They're virulent, they're hardy, they don't take much to grow. And that's interesting. I think more and more with information becoming available on the internet, I think it is possible to tap into those online communities. Whether that community, like for me, was in person or whether it's on the internet, I think there are so many avenues now to tap into those communities, really get started with just the basics that you need. In your case, it was a cardboard still air box that got you into DIY mycology, got you to the point where you are today. So it's something that's really more approachable than you might think at first.
I agree 100%. I mean, that's why I'm here. My job and my shop and my space is dedicated to helping people see the simplicity of the opportunity that takes a very small amount of time and space. When we talk about the actual processes and stuff, yeah, it takes some energy and some effort and some attention to detail, but it's no different than baking a cake. It's no different than, changing oil on a car. I mean, everybody out there can do this. And the experience of growing your own food and growing your own medicine, more importantly, when you look at your food as medicine, your relationship changes drastically, and you can do it. And when you're in my workshop, that's what we talk about, the fact that you can do it. And I see part of my job as an advocate for this access is to make sure that you don't stop going, that you keep trying, that you keep moving forward with it, because every good mycologist knows that you're going to have some contamination, you're going to have a failure. And that's the beauty of the process, because knowing that failure will occur and letting go of that failure allows you to really excel in it. And this is such a controllable thing that when you do excel, it's such a magical feeling.
So it sounds like that's really part of your mission at Haight Street Shroom Shoppe, is to build that community and give people that access and that knowledge to grow their own medicine, grow their own food. I mean, it sounds like there's a more altruistic motive there, and a motive more toward the empowerment of people rather than just strict monetization. So I guess moving into Haight Street Shroom Shoppe, is that the ethos behind it, or what was your goal in creating this hub here in San Francisco?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there, Darren. This space is here to kind of be a beacon for people interested in mushrooms, in mycology, and even in psychedelics. This is a space where people can come and learn and share information. And I hope that as time progresses and our everybody that is in this new phase of learning about mushrooms and fungi and the potential, I hope that this can be a place where people can gather and learn and share as much as possible. And the sky's the limit with what I'm trying to do. I mean, it's a lab space and a workshop space and an event space and a gallery. And so if you're a mushroom artist, or you have an interest in being a higher level lab person, we're really looking to try and collaborate with anybody out there, especially local Bay Area people that want to advance themselves and advance the community revolving around mycology.
And dear listeners, you can't see the space, but we are in the Haight Street Shroom Shoppe, and it is a beautiful space adorned with all the great fungi-related art and everything that you'd imagine. There's even a giant light-up Mush Love sign, kind of my tagline. I am in love with that sign. And there's 2 levels to it. There's this downstairs workshop event area that we're in, and then the second floor is really a proper lab setup. No cardboard still air box up there. You got a proper flow hood and all the equipment people need to really dive into advanced mycology.
Yeah, that's right. It is in transition still. We're working on finishing out the laboratory upstairs, but that's exactly what it's going to be. And eventually it's going to be a place where I hope people want to do research, want to bring projects and ideas, and then it'll be in a space where people can, share their love for mycology, both in an educational and a work format.
And this gets to a key point. So right now, I know you're hosting a lot of classes for the public. What has the turnout been like? How has the community received this? Are people coming out in droves, or how's that been with just doing, because you just do weekend classes now, correct?
Yeah, that's right. I do work a full-time job during the week, which
boo.
Boo. It is definitely how I feel about it. And then in the evenings I come home and I do mycology work to prep for my weekend classes, because I am a one-man show right now, and I hope to expand that. And again, that opportunity is open to Bay Area locals that are more advanced mycologists that might be interested in coming into the space and teaching workshops and things like that. But I teach one a week usually. I've been on a hiatus because of the holidays and some family stuff, but I'm about to start opening it up again. And then I hope that this call to arms will bring some interested folks to maybe come and say hello and find out what opportunities are available here.
Don't be strangers, guys. If you're in San Francisco, come to a class. And I think that's really important what you said about, if people are already knowledgeable, people are already experts, to come into the space. Because for me, being part of groups, obviously this isn't a mycology club officially. I guess that's kind of what it is. It's what it's becoming. But I think it's important for people to know that there are going to be other people coming into the space, and the learning can really happen between people attending. Not everyone necessarily has to see you as their mushroom guru. There's plenty of other people to connect with, which is really cool to have a space to kind of foster that connection and let people work, outside of class, as it were.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I have a lot of community friends that are local through either the San Francisco Mycological Society or through the decriminalization efforts that are going over on in Oakland, or the statewide effort down in LA, and a lot of connections and friends and mycologists that are all in these groups. And right now, while there are some club spaces, mycelial mass is a wonderful opportunity for people to get into a community atmosphere. Decriminalize.
Is that in Counterculture Labs in the East Bay?
That's right. It's over in the East Bay, and a lot of community members and people that are interested can go and check that out. There's also the Mycological Society here in San Francisco. There's also one in Berkeley. There's one in Sonoma. There's one in Napa. They're all over the place in the Bay Area. And our mushroom season we're approaching the high point, but we haven't had enough rain this year. That's my personal opinion. So I think we're going to get
we're going
to get a secondary push. So,
I'm hoping everything comes just a little bit later. That we're not skipping. Some people say we've skipped a little bit of mushroom season. I'm like, no, it's all going to come.
Yeah, the oysters were early. The armorias were early, and your amanitas that you're finding are blowing me away, man. I won't lie. They are some magical caps, man.
It's hard not to stop every time we see an amanita in a bush or under a tree. I mean, I love edible mushrooms, but I almost get more excited for seeing those bright red amanita caps. And actually, this is something you do in your classes, right? You take people out right in Golden Gate Park and go foraging and show them, like, right here in the city.
That's
there's
right.
Mushrooms to find.
That's right. So, it's not even that far of a walk. It's about 2 blocks from the store is the entry to Golden Gate Park, and then we take a short walk in the close vicinity of the Conservatory of Flowers. And I'd say, in general, and most of the people that come into my class, and you mentioned the response earlier. Yeah, everybody really enjoys it. They're all having a good time, and when people get contams, guess what they do? They tell me, and they return their jar and they get another one. I mean, that's how you have to keep going. But we usually find somewhere in the vicinity of like 12 different varieties within, a 15-minute walk.
Wow.
And I play a lot of fun, because I don't identify them for people. I hand them the book and say, let's go to work. Let's try and figure it out.
Right.
Because right now in society, we're all looking for quick answers, and Amazon.
Google it.
Yeah. I love you, Amazon, but I'm sorry, man. You made all small businesses out here pretty much the end.
Totally.
So that's why I'm not trying to sell things here as much as I'd like people to come and hang out and learn, and then, share their resources in the right ways. And when we go on that walk, we have a really fun time talking and joking around and looking at different types of mushrooms. And
you probably get some people outdoors who aren't outdoors enough. I mean, for me, in my day job, I'm in front of because I have a day job too. Boo, focus on mushrooms. I have a day job too, and I find that most of my time is spent hunched over a computer screen. And so I think it's key for people to have these outlets, these opportunities to get out in nature. And hey, if finding great medicinal mushrooms or beautiful mushrooms makes it all the more appealing to you, and that's a great little carrot on the stick to get people to get outside more.
That's exactly right. Mind, like I mentioned earlier, mind, body, spirit, and your body needs to be in motion, I think, to really take care of it in a lot of ways. And whether or not you're physically exerting yourself heavily, but, not being not sitting down all the time, getting up and moving around is a part of that balance. Our bodies want to feel that inertia. Our muscles want to move. And, getting outside is just like key. I mean, I always make jokes when I take people into the Fuchsia Dell, and I highly recommend going and sitting in there if you've never been there.
What's it called?
The Fuchsia Dell.
Fuchsia Dell.
Yeah, it's a very small little grove that is about a 5-minute walk from the Conservatory of Flowers, and we walk through it every time. But it's a very like magical place. It's very spiritual. You can sit down and meditate or send prayers or ask for guidance there, and I always feel very calm and collected there. And there's so many places in nature that offer that type of feeling. It's not necessarily just here in the city. I mean, right. It could be. I know you have your same places yourself that are those exactly for you.
Up in Marin, Sonoma, you get further north to Mendocino. I love just getting out there in the forest, getting lost in the redwoods. And for me, I don't have a spiritual practice like a meditation but that ends up being my meditation. That ends up being my spiritual practice, is being out in nature. One guy actually works at a local organic grocery store near me. He's a Cuban studying to become a babalao. So that's the kind of the holy man or a priestly role where he has to abstain from certain foods for months at a time. He wears all white. So he kind of has this aura of like holiness, or this great aura around him. And I love this phrase he says where he's like, my church is nature. He's like, for me, he's like, for our religion, our church is nature. When I go outside, I'm in my holy place. And I think that's really cool because today, obviously, people are disillusioned with organized religion. Everyone's finding their own kinds of spirituality. And I have this tendency to relate mushrooms to spirituality, even without psychoactives. I think getting into mushrooms and realizing the interconnectivity of mushrooms and mycelium in the forest kind of lends itself to this spiritual experience or that kind of philosophical spiritual thinking. And so I think it's really great to have that be, even if it's subconsciously, some kind of spiritual outlet for people, whereas we might not be getting served by organized religions or other institutions. This gives us a chance to plug into something greater than ourselves. So that's kind of a big part of why I get into it and why I really encourage people to get outside, because it's done that for me. So what you're talking about with going to these places in nature, that's obviously a huge part of my mission. That's why I do the goofy videos on Instagram. That's why I do what I do, is to get people to interact with nature and have that kind of higher communion with nature, as it were. So now that we've been covering spirituality, let's get to an aspect of mushrooms that people associate more readily with spirituality, and that is psychoactive or psychedelic mushrooms. And I bring that up in the context of the decriminalized nature movements. For people that don't know, Oakland, California, where we are in the Bay Area, decriminalized magic mushrooms along with some other entheogenic plants. And I know, James, you have been kind of a central figure. I saw you speak at the town hall meetings. I saw you really involved in that. So how's that experience been? And just talk about the decriminalization movement.
Yeah. So there's a whole bunch of different statewide and citywide movements occurring. There's Decriminalized Nature Organization, or Decriminalized Nature Oakland. And there's Decriminalized California, which is the statewide initiative. And I've had a great opportunity to work with the leadership since their inceptions. And then I'm also actually leading the Decriminalized San Francisco movement here in the city. And so if you live here in San Francisco, please go to decrimsf.org and sign the petition and have an email sent to your local supervisor. It does it automatically. You can choose to be anonymous if you want. But it's an opportunity to get the discussion started for decriminalization here in San Francisco as well. Just
because I'm really curious, what does that process look like? When people start the decriminalization process, I know there's sequences of meetings, different groups, different town councils you got to interface with. How does that work?
Yeah, so in from a city standpoint, using the DNO platform, let's just call it that, and their terminology and their how they like to word it. It's more of a grassroots approach, which you work citywide, city by city, looking for a local supervisor or a local city official who can sponsor some sort of discussion revolving around the decriminalization of entheogenic plants. And so I've been working using that same type of platform since basically last year, when Oakland decriminalized there, to build local relationships with my local supervisor. and local city officials to actually bring this topic to them too. So that is a lot of like canvassing, going and speaking with the staff of the supervisors, saying that we're interested in talking about this subject, that we have support, getting support through the signature gathering. And right now, we're right under 400 people have supported here in San Francisco that are all local people. And you don't need to be in San Francisco to support the cause here, but Berkeley is also doing it, and I've spoken on their city council decriminalization efforts as well. And so what will happen is after you get a board supervisor or someone to sponsor it, then they will bring it to the entire committee. And at that point, that's where the open discussion occurs. And usually when you get into open discussion, that's where a lot of the concerns and issues about the effect on the community, the effect on police, the effect on different local groups comes about. And then if, the universe provides, then there's a potential for, a motion to pass to potentially do a decriminalization or bring it up to a vote. And so far, a bunch of cities have moved forward with that. And with initially starting with Denver, then with Oakland, Santa Cruz is on it, Berkeley's on it, Chicago's on it. Wow. And if you follow any of these groups, Nashville, Tennessee, Western Sacramento, there are many cities, metropolitan cities, where there are local grassroots groups organizing and trying to take that approach of initiating the discussion with their local officials to see if decriminalization is something that the city can do.
And it's a similar blueprint, it sounds like. I mean, you have to find a civic champion, someone in local government who you're petitioning as citizens to kind of take up the mantle and bring it to discussion, and then let the various elected figureheads finally open that forum up, start the discussion. Now, is that where you came in when I saw you speak in the Oakland City Council? Had it moved past that point where, hey, someone in the government was interested, brought it to the floor, as it were, and then you were able to say your piece?
That's right.
Yeah.
I had been personally in the construction process of building out the shop for over a year, and conceptually the shop came about after I started learning and growing and saying I need to teach my friends because my wife is going to kill me for how many mushrooms I'm growing in this house, and and so I started showing my friends, and that was what really spurred the idea of kind of building a space to show people how easy it is. And then when I personally thought that decriminalization was something that wasn't even really going to be on the discussion table maybe until for the next 2 years, which still seems realistic in the actual, when we talk about federal level decriminalization, or at least bringing it up to a federal level discussion.
You think that's a conversation that'll happen though, federal level?
I think so. I think wonderful senators like AOC and some other prominent left-leaning figures are starting to listen.
She's come out and said some strong words about psychedelics.
That's right. And then there's a whole bunch of larger organizations with a lot of funding, whether it be MAPS or Field Trip Ventures or Compass Pathways, all these different groups that have different interests that are really, really throwing money down, and those groups are particularly throwing money into psychedelics,
right?
Not just mushrooms in general. And I think
much bigger universe there when you get into all psychedelics.
Right. Yeah. So for all of you out there who are listening and watching, the space of psychedelic mushrooms, and let's just say it right now, Darren, to the people out there, let's call them therapeutic mushrooms, not medicinal mushrooms, because when we're taking psychedelic mushrooms, we're working on our mind. And
let's change the language.
Yeah, and when we're eating medicinal mushrooms, we're working on our body. And I think that
body, mind, spirit.
That's right.
Body, mind, spirit. So for me, I always wonder, what is that difference between decriminalization and legalization? Because I've actually had some older folks in the mushroom community, I don't know, different people just say that, well, decriminalization isn't the way, it makes you a target. I don't quite understand exactly how that works, but what's the major difference, or why is decriminalization the focus right now?
So decriminalization, it's one approach to working towards legalization or regulation.
Okay.
And decriminalization is purely a mandate that is taken up, and it could be statewide, it could be citywide. And that mandate is that for the local law enforcement, that they will not police cases revolving around certain entheogenic plants. And that's for the Decriminalized Nature platform. When we talk about Decriminalized California, their language and their focus is purely on psilocybin mushrooms. And there's different ideas for the reasons for each of them, and they both have their strong points as to the reason that the statewide initiative is focusing purely on psilocybin, whereas the citywide initiatives are focusing on all entheogenic plant medicines. But in the end, it's an interesting difference.
Yeah. Well, and for me, as kind of the layman, and as people who follow my channel know, I'm not a big psychoactive mushroom person. I'm not, I don't know what you call it, a psychedelic influencer. But I think just as a layman, these properties of psilocybin mushrooms, of entheogenic plants, are extremely intriguing. And it seems really counterproductive to shove these things into the corner, into the dark, and not try to pull them out, give them the air of legitimacy, academic and clinical rigor that they deserve. And for me, I think this has to be a step in the right direction toward giving people sovereignty over their own mind, body, spirit, choosing what they want to put in it as responsible adults, and making it less of kind of a stigmatized thing that ends up feeding, as everyone knows, into that kind of underground area that almost makes it more appealing and more dangerous and all those different things.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I want to, so for the decriminalization, to kind of just spin off of what you said a little, where your first question too, right? If you're in Oakland, let's just use Oakland as an example. You can't sell, you can't buy, you can't grow.
So that's still illegal.
That's still illegal. But what you can do is, if you're over the age of 21, you can consume mushrooms or entheogenic plants. Now,
victimless crime,
right? How you get them, obviously, is it's a double standard here. But what that means is that if you, for some reason, like maybe you consumed too much psilocybin and you had a hard time and you weren't in a safe space or with the right set and setting and the right people or the right atmosphere, and you needed to go to the hospital, you wouldn't be prosecuted for consuming whatever.
That has to be a good thing.
That's right.
That has to be a good thing.
That is the step in the right direction. It's a step in the right direction. And to all the older generation that are kind of shaking their heads a little bit, well, I hear you and I understand exactly what you're saying. But my thought to the people that are saying it's either or with Decrim California or DNO, I'm going to say to you that this is a multi-pronged attack on our cognitive liberty. And we all need to unite under both forums and both aspects to make sure that we collectively all move in the same and the right direction.
I think people got there with cannabis. Finally, I think culturally we kind of moved there with cannabis for the most part. I see this following along that same track of reasoning. And this sounds like, it should be another podcast. There's so much to talk about here, but I did want to cover it because I know you're a central figure in that when I see these hearings, locally in our area. And, for a lot of people who are in the mushroom world, it's an element, obviously, we're all aware of, we've all been familiar with at one point or another. So I didn't want to kind of tuck it away in the corner. I wanted to bring it out and talk about it. But for you, I know that you've said that is not something that you want to have people coming into the Haight Street Shroom Shoppe bombarding you about, is where can I get? So, talk about decriminalize, but hey James, where can you get me some magic mushrooms? That's no go.
That's it's my hope is in a couple of years we'll be having a different story, and I'll be able to provide those types of services to people and access to those things. But spores are illegal in California, psychedelic spores in particular. Medicinal spores and gourmet spores are not illegal, but psychedelic spores are. And I want to make that point out to people. Everyone kind of gives me a side eye when they're like, well, you own a place called Shroom Shoppe. And I'm like, yes, I do own a place called Shroom Shoppe. And the thing that is funny about that is that we're here to grow mushrooms. And if the world provides an opportunity for us to actually talk about, psychedelic shrooms in a more colloquial format, then I hope that this place is something that's the educational place and a place that you could come purchase mushrooms. But right now it's not. It's just a space here to help people with the processes and learning how. I do provide some spores with my grow kits that you get when you leave my class, when you leave my workshop. Depending on what tier you can purchase, you can leave with some spores and leave with some stuff to go home and grow, and they are non-psychoactive, and so don't ask.
Right. No, I just wanted to
I appreciate
make sure that ground rule is out there before everyone hears this and starts coming to James like, hey, I heard you talking about decriminalize. Where are my magic mushrooms? I get that question all the time too.
Yeah.
And like you said, until that's in the milieu of the general culture, we're going to talk about the most potent medicinal legal mushrooms that we can and help people grow those and get more informed about those. And there's so much to work with just in that realm. In the future, hey, you never know, may be able to work in some of those other realms of psychoactives, but for now,
that's right. And remember, friends, I just want to I want to bring it out there so you can hear it right. We do talk about dung-loving mushrooms in my course. Right. We talk about dung-loving mushrooms a lot.
Yeah.
But we don't grow dung-loving mushrooms here.
Right.
Except for which one do you think I would grow? This is a quiz for Darren. If I was to grow a dung-loving mushroom, what dung-loving mushroom would I grow?
Well, let's see. This is testing my little mycological knowledge here. Now, I know that most forms of agaricus, white button, crimini, portobello grow on compost. So is it some form of agaricus? Oh, wine cap, King Stropharia. Okay, now most of my experience with King Stropharia, for people that don't know, you can look up wine cap mushrooms or garden giant mushrooms. They're a beautiful mushroom, and I've seen most people grow them in wood chips.
Yeah.
So you're saying, but is dung a better substrate, or just they can eat that too?
Yeah, they love it, and they will grow hand-sized.
Wow. Yeah, they're huge.
Yeah, huge. And I do, just to talk about my kits and what I build here, because I do make them to order. So if you come and take a course or whatever, I make everything to order. But I use manure-based compost because it's in my opinion, it's the best substrate to use. It's organic certified. My kits come with compostable grow bags. And I use jars versus inoculation bags because they're more reusable.
Yeah.
And when you're on the home level, most people being able to reuse your supplies and stuff like that, that's a really big plus.
Yeah.
And then when you guys get to the point where you're going to make 24 jars, then we can talk about maybe using bags or something like that.
Yeah. Once you start getting a lot of glass jars.
When you decide you need 2 pressure cookers, and I have 4 plus an autoclave, so when you decide you need 2, then
it's a sign you have an
addiction. That's right.
At that point, you have a mycology addiction.
Or you're just crazy.
Yeah. So you are sending people home with actual inoculated spawn.
That's right.
And you're sending people back. Now, when you send people back, do they have a bigger with that compostable bag, a substrate block? They can then pour the spawn in themselves?
That's right. Right. So I teach the entire process of inoculation. I teach how to make spore syringes in the class. I teach about liquid cultures and about agar and transfers. And then we go through a jar inoculation. And then I send you home with a jar that is non-inoculated, so that if you acquire your own spores, you then have your own jar that you can grow a different strain out on. And then I usually provide a guaranteed jar, which has some sort of grain-to-grain transfer, agar transfer, or liquid culture that allows everybody a higher level of success on a potential for grow. So, we always try and grow with more than one, right? Because if you just do one and you get contaminated, then you don't have anything to work with. So
right.
I try to send people home with enough to give them the highest rate of success as humanly possible.
And with DIY mycology, the first thing you get familiar with is contamination. So that's really smart because it's bound to happen. It doesn't mean that you did anything wrong.
Yeah,
it's just the nature of the beast.
It is part of the game. It is part of the game.
The food that mushrooms love, bacteria and other things love too.
Yeah, mold, trike, all these different things, and I do spend a few moments in the course discussing contamination and showing pictures and saying, don't let this deter you, because for me, it took me about 2 years to get good at home growing. And there was about a 7-8 month period in that 2-year learning period where I couldn't grow anything. I couldn't get anything to grow. I mean, I tried this tech and that tech, and I kept changing everything, and I just was pulling my hair out. And then I learned that by putting my colonization bags, my bags that were colonizing, on the floor in the closet that I was using, in the wintertime, because of the pipes in my old building, it actually heated the floor up, and that heating of the floor actually caused my mycelium to not grow correctly and contam everything.
Oh, there you go. And something, simple, structural that you could
right.
change, right?
And the moment I took those bags off of the ground, everything went back to normal. I wish I'd figured that out a little bit quicker, but that's part of the game, and that's the thing, is trying to pull all these variables together and understanding them. But the fun part about mycology is there's really only a few variables that you really need to understand.
And it's one of those things where you really have to try it to get good at it. I mean, that's kind of everything in life, but for me, I could read DIY mycology books, but maybe it's just my personality, but until I got my hands into grain, until I started really doing it, then you kind of know it on a cellular level, and you're able to really get your head wrapped around what are you trying to do, and then you see the variables that you can start playing with, and it becomes a lot more workable. So for people that are interested in this, I get a lot of people asking me, can you give me advice on growing your own mushrooms? I want to start doing this as a hobby, or I feel like this is my passion, but I don't know how to explore it. Are there any basic recommendations, maybe great books, great online communities, basic equipment, maybe a good place to get cultures from? Because I know those can be variable in terms of quality.
Yeah, I can offer a lot of those resources. So YouTube is always a great place to look.
Everyone get your pens and paper.
Yeah, YouTube. Yeah, YouTube's to start. I'm a visual learner. So with the visual learners, some of the people that helped me learn were Willie Myco, who is an internet celebrity revolving around home mushroom cultivation and entheogenic extracts. Another guy that is very well known that was very helpful to me was Roger Rabbit. He's another well-known mycologist. Then the works of John Allen as one of the guys in the community collecting spores. And then our hero and our man, Mr. Stamets. And I do highly recommend his When You Bridge the Gap and You Are Ready to Really Learn About Mycology. His book on growing gourmet and medicinal mushrooms is the Bible as far as I'm concerned. Whenever I can't figure something out, I can find something in that book to help me figure out what I think the issue is. Then other places, shroomery.org, which is a wonderful, wonderful resource that is so silly in depth. And please, friends, pull your old Boolean searching skills out of the internet days when you were in high school, because that's how you make that site work for you. You need to be specific with your searches. And then once you find the individuals that you personally like, because there's a lot of really skilled people,
and it's
there.
A massive forum, right?
Yeah.
So you're saying use those quotation marks when you're searching for certain terms.
That's right.
Get in there in your search engine game, and you can find just tomes of
information. and look at it, because look at how many views it has. Look at how long it's been up there. Look at how new it is. All of those sorts of things. And when you really drill down and give yourself, a really long evening of not watching Netflix and instead watching Shroomery.
There you go, a good substitution.
That's right. You'll really, really be able to find a lot of amazing information. And let me tell you, friends, there really is no right or wrong answer. There's just a lot of different opportunities to learn.
And don't be afraid to try things. I think use the basic, you start getting those concepts, and then don't be afraid to maybe try something different with your substrate than anyone else is doing. Try different. I remember people, so I was teaching classes very briefly at the Counterculture Lab space over in Oakland. We were doing a lot of low-tech cultivation. And I had people coming into our little classes. Now, this is about 2 or 3 years ago at this point. But we had people coming into the classes saying that they were sterilizing their jars of grain that they were going to inoculate by putting them in the microwave. And it didn't compute with me at first. I was like, this is not proper. This is not what the books say or what I've learned. And, it's almost like fuck what the books say or what you learn. These people were getting results with it. And it was kind of like this we started calling it like microwave tech that people were having success with. And now that I've talked to, a couple of people who are in the DIY mycology space, that's really where you start finding new things. You start finding new ways of doing things. That's really where you kind of make it your own. So don't be afraid to try new things.
Yeah. And ask.
Yeah.
Ask.
Yeah. There you go.
I mean, I ask, I get contams. We're going to go back and walk around the lab after the show, and I have a big pile of contaminated grain to show you.
Oh, it sounds like fun.
It's beautiful.
Save the best for last.
That's
James.
Right. I know. And, it's just part of the game. And, and as I go through, I go and I speak to my friends and my other community members, and they all share things with me that usually offer me some sort of insight. And that's the fun part about this is building up friendships and building up relationships with people and following along and trying to figure things out collectively.
Now, that's been my experience with in-person or online communities. It feels like a very helpful and accepting community, whether it's a Facebook group, a Reddit subreddit like Mushroom Growers, Shroomery. If you post a call for help or ask for advice, I found people to be really receptive and responsive. Now, I know that's not everyone's experience. And sometimes people get users on there that get high and mighty and get condescending. Why would you ask that? Or that's it. There are dicks everywhere. But I think on the whole, the community is really open and responsive. And don't be afraid to put it out there. If you do have questions, if you do have issues, and you're going to get help, don't learn by being too afraid. Don't prevent yourself from learning by being too afraid to ask, I guess what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I am a self-taught mycologist. I'm a citizen scientist. The research and the things that I do for my own personal and for the organizations that I'm involved with, I try not to get myself hung up, and I say that in the course, there's, especially when you start really getting geeked out on mushrooms, the level of knowledge and just the naming, the way they name the scientific names for mushrooms is, it's an amazing thing. However, when you meet a higher level mycophiles, and a mycophile is somebody that really loves mushrooms. When you meet them, they can spout the Latin names like right off the top of their head, and you feel like you're getting hammered over the head with a foreign language.
Right.
And my advice to you, friends, is just take it with a grain of salt. And every time you try and say one of the names, think of it just like the banana and a Fofana game. That's how I try to think of it.
For me, it was, I stopped watching sports as much. Not everything's fine with sports. I have nothing against sports. But the amount of brain power we have to remember people's names, the stats, and how many touchdowns they have, shift a little bit of that brain power toward Latin names for fungi if you're interested in it. And you'll be impressed with how much you can remember and, how much you can cope with Latin sounding names that you have no basis for. So just as we're approaching about an hour, I want to know what the future plans are. We can be as succinct as you want to be for Haight Street Shroom Shoppe, what opportunities are opening up, if you're maybe envisioning this as like a co-working space. I don't know if that's ever in the plans for people to kind of be part of a trusted list to come in and do their own projects, or what's the future for the Shroom Shoppe?
Yeah, I'm really happy you asked that because all of those things are in the future. Right now, as it stands, I'm going to continue teaching my Mycology 101 course, and then my next step for the shop is to try and build up a group of advanced mycologists that want to teach people in the same format, that want to, reserve 2 or 3 hours on any given night to kind of come. And I want to build that small collective of mushroom enthusiasts and mushroom local people to try and support their individual and collective endeavors revolving around the different things that people are doing with mushrooms. We have a lot of awesome local scientists, awesome local, people that are involved in cannabis industry that are really interested in mushrooms, that have a really amazing set of knowledge base that crosses over. And I want to try and bring those people together collectively. And then I hope to open that lab up in the loft, and we'll go look at that as well. But I'm working on transitioning all the lab equipment up there to create a fully functional lab and educational space. And part of my hope and dream within that space is that will be available to a group of individuals that can join a collective and be a part of a mycology group with access to maybe potentially some higher level equipment that is really much more research based. And we're talking like HPLCs, lab work, solvent disposal, and things like that. That's my hope and my dream. Right now, we're going to focus on just getting it to a working space where mycology work, culture transfers, and anybody that wants to come in and do work within the availability that happens. And I'll have basically social hours coming up pretty soon where people can come in, reserve time to make still air boxes, reserve time to ask questions, reserve time to make monotubs, come and have a beer, come and have a glass of wine, come and have some mushroom tea, hang out and just chat and know that the space is open. I'm going to start that pretty soon on I'm thinking Thursday nights. Friends, please sign up for the email list. That's where you first and foremost get all dibs on anything that happens here is through email. And that comes directly from me. So I won't spam your inbox because I don't have time to write a lot of emails trying to promote events and stuff. And hopefully we will have a really solid calendar. My hope is by March, I'm going to have a solid calendar of recurring events here, and people will cycle in. And I already have some mushroom products that are from some of my collaborations that are available, and there'll be some of that stuff available, and then eventually mycology supplies as I get to that point and create an ability to help everybody locally that is interested in this format.
Well, I think that kind of open lab space, that open community space, is almost like a public service. I mean, for people like me now, I live with my partner in a pretty small cottage up in Marin. I don't have the space for a flow hood. I hardly have the space for all the things I have, plus my dog. So to have that kind of area that's open with real proper equipment, I mean, you add in the community of interested people and people that know their stuff. I want people to understand that's really a treasure to have that available. And as far as I know, up until the past few years, even in a place like the Bay Area that has a huge mushrooming community, there haven't been public spaces with that readily available. We've mentioned Counterculture Labs a couple times. That's a space that has some of this equipment in there. There are a number of different organizations kind of rotating, trying to use everything. So I think the more spaces like that we have, the easier it is for people to really start this journey. And I think at the end of the day, the goal is to have everyone who has the inclination to be their own self-taught mycologist and be able to grow their own medicine and food. I mean, that seems sustainable to me, that people could have enough working mycological knowledge to not have to drop $80 on turkey tail supplements or lion's mane supplements, be able to grow enough for themselves and their family. And that's really a way to kind of empower people in a step forward as a society to taking our power back when it comes to food and medicine.
I agree 100%. Learn how to grow your own medicine, learn how to cultivate your own food. And, it's a very simple recipe to a path to a more healthy and happy life. I'm right with you, Darren, 100%.
Right on. So where's the best place for people to find you? Instagram, websites, all that good stuff.
For direct communication, if you're trying to get at me and want a response, Instagram is a good spot. That's usually where I'm floating my imagery around the most. For the actual site, for the actual updates and classes and stuff, being involved on my email list, like I mentioned, is the next best spot. You guys can email me at james@haightstreetshroomshoppe.com. If you'd like to ask questions, please give me about 24 hours of response time. That's usually how much it takes for me. And then, feel free to reach out. The store isn't fully open as a retail space, but like I mentioned, I want to get these social hours going pretty soon. So that's going to be the kind of open opportunity for people to come in and check it out, And we have a lot of great businesses around my neighborhood, a really amazing taco shop and cafe next to me, a pizza shop across the street. We have the oldest open poetry night in I think in the country, is right across the street from here. And that's every Wednesday and Thursday. So I'm kind of thinking we might be open on Thursday nights so that you guys can come and partake on some real San Francisco neighborhood life.
Poetry, good food, mushrooms. People got to get over here. This is going to be the new Thursday night date night. Come eat some food, listen to some poetry, grow some mushrooms. And that's awesome. I'm going to link up all of your stuff everywhere this podcast is. People should be able to click those resources, get in contact with you. And then as a final thought here, I don't want to be remiss if I skip this. I know for me, it seems like we are on just the tip of this tsunami wave of mushroom knowledge, of mushroom products, of kind of the mushroom world just emerging. I've only been into it for about 3 or 4 years. I think you're around the same time. And I think we're symptomatic of kind of this emerging wave of mushroom knowledge. Companies like Four Sigmatic, tons of companies out there using mushroom products. Yeah. So I guess what do you see as the mushroom future for people that are listening to this? I think it's something people should explore, both as a passion and a hobby, but also as a career. I mean, I encourage family, friends who have kids going to school, don't know what they want to do. Have you ever thought about mycology? Ends up being my speech to them. So what do you think that kind of future of the mushroom world is?
I'm right with you on that. I think there's a huge future here, right? I mean, and I don't want to use like the cannabis industry. I mean, we're here in the Bay Area, so those of us that are
hard to avoid it.
Those of us that are cannabis enthusiasts or medicinal or recreational cannabis users, we all have a pretty good knowledge into how that industry developed, and it came at a fledgling speed and went through a very interesting medicalization, then decriminalization, then legalization process. And I think right now, because in particular revolving around the psychedelics, people are looking at that industry as the forefront of how the potential for medicinals, and in particular psychedelics, is they're looking at it as a framework for the potential.
Right.
Now, I'm pretty sure you'd agree with me that people that take psychedelic medicine, or in particular psilocybin, they don't consume psilocybin the same way that people that consume cannabis on a day-to-day or medicinal basis do.
That would be rough.
Yeah.
I don't think people should. I
don't recommend that. Yeah. I don't recommend taking psilocybin as much as some of you out there take dabs and smoke joints.
Right. Come back to earth, guys.
Right. Yeah. Please, for a moment. And but the point that I'm making is that so there's a fledgling industry that's going to be huge.
Right.
Yes. All you out there that are looking at the cannabis industry as the potential as a potentiator for like what the mushroom industry could be, I'm not sure that comparison is really the right comparison.
Right.
But I'm going to say that based on that tsunami analogy that you were talking about, there is a huge wave happening right now. And people like yourself and myself we're all kind of standing on our surfboards at the top of the wave, getting ready to drop in. And we all need to get a bigger surfboard and get on the same surfboard and ride that wave together. That's how I feel about it, because the opportunities are going to be bountiful, and if you do have an interest in mycology, that first step is opening that door through an educational atmosphere, whether it's online or coming and taking a class here or getting a private in-home with somebody that you know that's grown mushrooms, or even just ordering one of those funny kits online that you just poke a hole in the box and then mushrooms grow out of it. Whatever it is, that's where the potential is there for many, many new products, many, many offshoot industries, whether it's in health, whether it's agriculture, whether it's in pharmaceuticals, whether it's in, recreation, whether it's in different industries revolving around those different things.
Supplying those industries, right?
That's right.
Never been a better time to get on the myco wave. It's
Right.
certainly not too late. It won't be. It's never too late.
Yeah, and friends, let's be clear too. Like I love saying this. It's not. I don't think the money train, if you're interested in money, is in growing mushrooms, as in growing fruit bodies of mushrooms. I think it's probably the capital gain is in the industry supporting those things and supporting the people that are in the community. Right. So creating experiential things, creating opportunities to gather collectively, you know, and start building that groundswell and getting on that surfboard together. That's where I think the real successful opportunities exist.
And even if it's just a hobby and a passion, you're going to get enough out of it that it's going to be life-changing and add a new layer of fulfillment. And, you know, as much as we're all taught to grind and hustle, not everything has to be a grind and hustle. It can be a hobby and a passion and still give you so much, which mushrooms have done for both of us. So, all right. Well, I think that's a good place to wrap things up. James, thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing the space. I'm excited to see everything you got in the works here. Make a tour. If you're in the San Francisco area, definitely put Haight Street Shroom Shoppe on your radar. A little bit of a tongue twister. Put that on your radar. I'll have all the links so you can reach out and get involved. And yeah, thanks for the time.
Thank you so much, man. Much love, bro.
Much love.